So if you look at health, what I found is that the people we work with are some of the most amazing on the planet. And I grew up on a cattle ranch, like I mentioned, and the way I got a chance to access some of these phenomenal humans and get to know them deeper on a health level is through my own journey. So how many of you have ever had your blood labs ran, and when you got the results back, it was just like pretty much nothing? It's like your doctor said everything looks good, you're on your own, and or here's a statin, which is a very highly prescribed drug, and you're like, well, why is my cholesterol high in the first place? So today we're going to go through that, but in my journey, I learned after seeing 5 doctors, growing up on a cattle ranch, I wanted to be anything but a farmer when I grew up, and so I had an uncle who was a doctor. I said, I want to be like him. And I ended up getting really sick in my undergraduate work, right when I was going into the medical program at the U. And it was 5 doctors who misdiagnosed me that allowed me to look outside of the box. And I found a naturopathic doctor who was also an acupuncturist, and he ran the right lab. And what I learned when we looked at the markers, I learned my thyroid peroxidase antibodies were through the roof. They're about 680. My thyroglobulin antibodies were in the 200s, and so he said, "Hey, you actually don't have an issue, with your skin, or because I was putting on weight and my skin was all like eczemaed out." And he said, "The problem is you have an autoimmune disease." And so we started treating my thyroid. I was gluten-free before it was cool, and started getting my health restored. And so I'll share with you my journey, but the thing that I've really found is that all of the people that I met with, they all have a story when it comes to their health. So how many of you have ever let your health drop? How many of you would probably say you would, I think we've all pursued our business, we put other things far above our health, but I've got 3 primary values that I built East West on, and number 1 is when your health improves, everything improves. And what do you notice when your health improves? Energy focus. You can prioritize, you can get things done. How many of you can make more money when you're healthier? Have you noticed that, how that works? And the other thing I notice is relationships. It's really challenging to be your best self in your relationships if you don't have your health. So this is a client of mine. He was an architect. He sold his firm about 2 years before we met. And what he was concerned with was he wanted to lose weight. He wanted to golf. He's got freedom of time now. He's got financial resources, but he feels like crap all the time. His knees are bone on bone. He can't function. He couldn't even tie a shoe was the big thing. And there's some things he couldn't see very well, which bothered him. It was supposed to be a joke, but got it. All right. There's some penis pump people in the room. I'm trying to promote your business, Eric. I'll keep it clean, sorry. Sunday after all. So Greg, he came because he sold his practice because he couldn't remember the dimensions of the building. So he had this unique ability to go in and he could remember dimensions. I'll share his labs in a minute. This is Tammy. If you look at her face before and after, it wasn't just that she wanted to lose weight. She tried everything, and nothing seemed to work. She would lose the weight. It would come back on, but she was at a point of life in her life where she's going through a major transition and needed her health recovered, but didn't know what to do. Here's my friend Charlie. He felt like his health was slipping away, and now he's got more mental clarity. His energy levels are soaring, and he simply feels fantastic. Looks a lot younger too. I'll share one in a minute. This is Zach. Thanks, Steve. Steve actually sent Zach over, and look at that dude. You got to get a picture for him. He would send me a little selfie. Sometimes I get pictures of my patients with their shirts off, and randomly my wife's like, "Why do you get those pictures?" I'm like, I honestly don't ask for these, but they do come. Luckily, it's dudes. Ladies, do not send your pictures. My wife will. I'm very tightly managed at home, and so I don't. How many of you have loved ones, like people in your family who you wish they would get healthy? And my brother Kate, who runs operations, and all of you like affiliate people, he's the one to talk to. But he was getting chubby. He's almost 10 years younger than me. And what finally was the breaking point for him, he was tired. He was working in the corporate world. And our nephews, I was like, who do you think's older, me or him? Because I was telling him he's chubby and all the nice things big brothers do. It wasn't enough. And so they're like, Kate is, and it's like, nope, I'm almost 10 years older. And so he's doing great now. He's lost 55 pounds. He came on to East West about, it's 2013, so 11 years ago. And it's been so fun being able to work with my brother because he's got a whole different set of skills, and we've been able to do a lot of fun things. But if he didn't focus on his health, probably wouldn't have had that opportunity. You can see that he's a security guard for O.C. Tanner, and the funniest thing is you can see the pictures just in like 6 months. But one of the doctors on my team that works with him, she said, he's actually really good looking. Doesn't he look better? And he's like a whole new man. His wife is thrilled. So the biggest thing that he had to do is give up alcohol, because I think a lot of us, in his case, it was about a half a fifth of whiskey at night. And I said, that's just really not going to propel you forward in your longevity journey. I mean, unless it's a certain kind of whiskey, but it was not going to work. So here's what we found. If you get the right test ordered, this is where you can get clarity. How many of you love clarity in your business, where you can see the metrics? And how many of you would love to have clarity of understanding what are the big threats that could end my life early? What are the things that I could do to generate more energy? And maybe if there's some things there that help me gain a little bit more muscle and have a little better body composition. It's a big thing, because we look at not only health span and lifespan. I mean, we want to align those. But one of the things that I want to do is, when it's my time, I want to die fast and at a young age, or at an old age, but young. And one of the things that if you look at one of my mentors, she's in her 80s, and she could still do like the splits. She's like energetic, little Japanese woman, Dr. Maekawa. But it's so phenomenal to see that you can be in your 80s and have enormous energy. In our society, what we do is we set people down in front of a TV at about the age of 70, and then it's what Peter Attia calls the marginal decade, where that last decade's your worst decade. But I think all of you would want to go out fighting. I mean, I want to be right in the middle of my biggest project and go out. My great-grandfather died that way. He was a fur trader in Salt Lake City. He also collected these rare coins. And one day, he'd work in his wood shop, and he was in his late 80s. My grandma was in her mid-80s, and he heard commotion upstairs, and she screamed. So he got his gun, as most Americans do, and walked up the stairs. And there's two robbers that came in to try to steal some of his rare coins. So he shot one of them in the leg, and the other dude just fell down and defecated himself. So don't break into my grandfather's house. But the interesting thing about him is the day before he passed away, he mowed the lawn. He was working on this rocking horse for his great grandkids, and he went to bed and he died really fast. So that's the way that I want to go. And the interesting thing about that is all my clients, and I've worked with thousands of people, I see at the end of the life, if they live a healthy life, they die much faster. Eldon, one of my patients, lived to be 103. He had like 182 grandkids at the time. I mean, he would rent out these huge rooms for family events. Amazing. So the way that you can get there is, number one, you've got to analyze where the problems are and looking deeper, not just taking things at face value. The problem with the medical society today and the medical establishment is you can't get the right diagnostics until you have medical necessity. So I don't know if you guys remember Obamacare, where we were mandated everyone's got to like get health insurance or you got to pay a fine. Do you guys remember that? And so Obama, he's running again. I mean, it's not him running, but someone else. But the thing that happened with that is we all became card-carrying members, and everyone thinks that if everyone has health insurance, we're going to get healthy. But the problem is you get access to a medical system that's fundamentally broken because it's built around the fact that they want you sick. I don't know if you realize that, but if you know how insurance is billed and how coding works, is the sicker you get, now we can jump into a procedure, and that's where the money's made. So when you analyze data, you want to look at what's causing inflammation, what's causing the tiredness, and where are you toxic. And then once you analyze that, then you can optimize, and that's where the real transformation happens. So with Greg, like I mentioned, he had some pretty significant issues that he wanted to cover. So the first thing we did is ran his labs. And how many of you have had your labs ran with us yet? Okay, great. And if you want to bring your labs up, I can reveal all your secrets in front of everybody. If not, we'll go through his. So the first thing is you want to look at your blood sugar. And blood sugar is really important because if you've got blood sugar that's going up and down, that's where you're going to have energy fluctuations. Anyone get that afternoon kind of lull? Brain doesn't work as well. You eat lunch, and then you either need, like, I got to have a Red Bull, a shot of tequila, or a nap, right? And so hopefully you do all three. And is that how you like it? Okay, tequila. Excuse me, I got it wrong. Yeah, thanks. But if you look at your hemoglobin A1C, it gives you an average of about 90 days. But the two markers that never get ran that I see in labs is your insulin fasting and your C-peptide. And you can see he's like, oh, I don't have blood sugar issues. I'm like, well, do you crave sugar at night? And he's like, oh man, at night it's like a bear comes out. So I go raw, he gets into the pantry and just goes crazy. And so the interesting thing about that is if you do this thing, we call it the 3-2-1 method. How many of you love a good night's sleep? If you hate sleep, then don't do this. But what we recommend is 3 hours before you go to bed, stop eating. And it's harder than it sounds because you want to let your digestive system rest for at least 12 hours. There's a really great book, Circadian Code, by Sachin Panda. And he does all the research on it, but I'll spare you the details. But if you just brush your teeth right after you eat dinner, it makes it really easy not to eat. Sounds silly, but it works because my wife is amazing. She bakes all these protein. She's like a macros lady. She's crazy with it. But she always has these protein snacks that she wants to feed me. And I'm like, no, I'm let my gut rest. And so I just started brushing my teeth. It worked great. Oh, sorry, babe, I already brushed my teeth. Then there's no offense because who wants to brush their teeth twice, So she was just happy I started brushing my teeth, is what she told me. So 2 hours before you go to bed, stop drinking water. Unless you love waking up to urinate, there's probably some Instagram reels that you want to catch up on, but otherwise, just stop drinking any kind of fluids. And then an hour before you go to bed, it's a good time to turn on Fox News, CNN, any of your, whatever you want to study politically, it's the best time to get it in. The shit that you have no control over, think about that before you go to bed. All right, well, there's some better things to do before you go to bed, like dim your lights, turn off the TV, no screen time, grab a book. There's this old-fashioned thing called making love, and it's really fun to do, like that hour before you go to bed. The ladies are like, yeah, the dudes just fall right asleep, and now we're ready. So anyway, I won't get into that. I'm just trying to plug these guys back here. All right, so next thing, Anna and Gap. How many of you would say you've got more stress than you'd like in your nervous system? And as entrepreneurs, it's like, I find most of you have a little bit of like PTSD. You have this cash flow god that you have to answer to every month, right? And it's like, do I get to play another month? And then you hope you get to play another month, and then another month. But it drives on our nervous system, and you can see it in what's called the anion gap, and that's where you can see the amount of stress in the nervous system. So if your anion gap is high, and if you have labs in front of you, you can take a look at this. One of the best things you can do is cold plunge. because it shocks your nervous system. It pushes all the blood into the organ systems, and then you get this nice vasodilation when you come out of it. But anion gap also shows if your blood's too acidic, so you lose nutrient sensing. So one of the hallmarks of aging is loss of nutrient sensing and loss of proteostasis. So anion gap is a really good marker to also see if you have digestive issues, because those two seem to go hand in hand. So it's a breakdown of proteins. So it's proteostasis is how you denature proteins so they can either become building blocks for the muscle, or they can just ferment in your gut and cause a lot of gas. I mean, it's a crazy thing, because as we age, we need more protein, but yet we tend to eat less the older we get. And especially if you have ever looked at like the menus in nursing homes or hospitals, it's like, we've got a carb deluxe for you. So, but if your anion gap's high and you've got insulin resistance, there's a condition called metabolic disease, and it goes undiagnosed. So for years, we thought cancer was a product of the DNA, and there's just these morphisms that take place, and then you have this cell that spins out and it starts replicating uncontrollably. But there's a researcher named Warburg, and what he realized is it was the mitochondrial dysfunction in the cells, and that's actually what causes a lot of the cancer. And so you'll see that with anion gap insulin resistance, and I'll show you some of the peptides you can use to change those pathways pretty quick so you can get more energy. ALT and AST, so these are liver enzymes. So I asked him, I said, well, Greg, how much you drink? And he's like, no, just a little bit. I'm like, what's a little bit to you? And he's like, oh, a few cocktails, here and there. And I'm like, all right, I'm fine with that, but what's here and there? And he's like, well, just when I take clients out. How often do you take clients out? He was a consultant at the time. Well, about 3 times a week. How many drinks? 3, 4 drinks. What about weekends? I don't drink on weekends. Okay, great. Well, unless people come over. And then, so anyway, we realized he was consuming too much. So this is how I secretly spy on you guys. Ferritin's high. If you wake up in the morning and you feel like your body's like really stiff and tight, anyone ever have that feeling? Yeah, so you may want to check your ferritin, because you guys know Tin Man. You remember Wizard of Oz? And the Tin Man, like that's the Tin Man syndrome, because you have this, ferritin's a protein that stores iron inside of your red blood cells, and iron is so powerful for the body, and it causes all these cool cytochromes to turn on, so you get good mitochondrial energy, you get this cytochrome activation for your phase 1, phase 2 detoxification. But if your ferritin's high, and if it gets too high, it can cause a lot of oxidative damage, and it can actually lead to heart attacks. And we do carotid artery scans, and we've seen a lot of our patients who've had elevated levels of ferritin, and they end up looking really old from a cardiovascular perspective when we look at the thickness of their intima media. Cholesterol levels. How many of you are tired of hearing about cholesterol? Today I'm going to tell you why everyone needs to get on a statin. We should start putting it in our drinking water with fluoride. I think it's important. And in my history, so when I was moving sprinkler pipes, the thing that we realized that caused my autoimmunity was this beautiful substance called Roundup. And it was really cool. Late 80s, early 90s, our yields just started going up, and I'd be moving these sprinkler pipes, and these planes would come and crop dust the fields, and I get soaked in it. And I was like, this is great. And then I'd go race my dirt bike around, and then go spray the Roundup everywhere. And what the drug rep, it's worse than that, the poison rep told us is it's so safe you could practically drink it. And but that's what we learned. It was the glyphosate in the Roundup that was disrupted my biome, disrupted my gut. And we're seeing that more and more because Roundup's everywhere. Even organic food has it. So the problem is with that mitochondria. And if you look at cholesterol, all cholesterol is doing is it's repairing the arterial lining. And so it's not just sugar that's damaging it, because when your blood sugar goes up and down, that's a problem. But we have these seed oils, and if you go and look at some of the history of our food, how many people would say our food's probably not as nutrient dense as you'd like it to be in? This is where we just need to go to Europe and maybe you feel a little different there. So there's causes of high cholesterol. Cholesterol is kind of like the paramedics that are showing up on the scene. It's not the problem. So homocysteine. Did you have a question? Oh. Yeah. And so then we say, okay, what's the cause instead of here's a drug, right? If you look at homocysteine, this is a marker that shows how well you methylate and detoxify, but it also can be an indication of inflammation in the cardiovascular system and the brain. And so I asked this patient, I'm like, well, have you ever had any concussions, traumatic brain injuries? He's like, no. I'm like, you've never had your bell rung. Did you play sports, like football, anything like that? He's like, well, I played rugby for about 10 years. I'm like, okay. You ever get your bell rung? He's like, yeah, 3-4 times a week. And then if I don't know how the game exactly works, but he just told me, all I can see is the vision. He said he used to have to drink beer out of a boot. Are there any rugby players in here? And I was like, is that like a ritual, Glenn? Like,
that's kind of more of a bogan rugby player. That's a bogan rugby player, not like a more sophisticated rugby player like me. I wouldn't drink it out of a boot, not a dirty boot.
Whiskey out of the boot.
Oh,
right?
Of course. I mean, that's a given. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so pretty interesting, but that's where we realized we did a treatment on his brain and got the inflammation down, and within 3 weeks, I said, I think this might be the reason why you can't remember the dimensions, and we treated his brain, and within 3 weeks, he's like, I can remember the dimensions of the buildings. It's phenomenal.
What kind of treatment did you do to his brain?
Oh, I'm going to get to that in just a minute. This is what I call the hook, I think, in the marketing terms. Is that right? Yeah, I'm learning from you guys. All right. And so his testosterone. Does anyone know what it feels like to have low testosterone? Yeah, it's crazy. Women and men. And we used to think that prescribing testosterone to women was like, no, it's a male's hormone. It's not even that at all. And our females love it, but there's an optimal level and a suboptimal level, and testosterone gets lowered every year. And so when you look at traditional blood labs, they just take the ranges and they just adjust based on what's going on in the average population, right? Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Well, unless you look at testosterone levels today and they're over 100% lower than they were 30 years ago. So we got to get that up. So his testosterone was low, and one of the things testosterone does is it gives you confidence. It protects your brain. It's also, you've got more receptors for testosterone in your heart than your entire body combined. And what we find is that patients, their energy gets turned on. I had a client that was reading his labs, and I was like, what kind of work do you do? And he's like, I just sold my software company for $32 million, and he just told me, and he's like, then the wire just hit my account. And I'm like, why are you with me? You should go celebrate. This is awesome. And he's like, I don't even care. I lost all my friends. My wife doesn't like me. My kids hate me. So he put it all into his wealth building, but when he ran his testosterone, it was 128. I'm like, I think I know the problem, at least a place to start. So eosinophils, allergies. So some of the things we did, and this is where I love peptides. And so peptides are just little protein structures, because the thing about entrepreneurs is, how many of you, if you don't get a result quickly, you move on? Like, that's what you have to do as an entrepreneur, right? And I've always been like that. And so the thing I love about peptides is I got deep into these about 10 years ago, and I just saw how much improvements they made, because these proteins naturally exist in your body. And if you can put the right sequence of peptides in based on your blood labs, that's where you can really start optimizing your health in the fastest way possible. What most doctors do is they're using peptides the same way they use drugs, and they're still just prescribing them on these long cycles. But how the body works best is if you can cycle the right peptides on. And so each month you're going to be on some different peptides. So these are some general peptides we had him on. Tirzepatide. I think all of you have heard of this. It's a GLP-1 agonist, really good for weight loss. But the thing I love about tirzepatide is if you dose it properly, and that's about 90% less than what you're going to see in a Mounjaro prescription, people's cravings go away. It works on the brain. It's protective for your heart because GLP-1 agonists exist in your body naturally. And yes, there's natural ways, like you can use berberine and all these things, but the peptides just work about 100 times better if done properly. We got him on testosterone, so he started building muscle. At the same time, he's lost fat. That last picture, that guy that I showed you, the security guard, now we did his DEXA scan, or his, we did the PsyQ measurements, so we measured his body composition, his fat to muscle ratios, and he lost no muscle, so pretty phenomenal. 5-amino-1-MQ, it's a great peptide for the mitochondria, activates energy. Gonadorelin is, if you're on testosterone replacement or on any kind of hormones, you want your body producing as much as possible on your own. And this is where a lot of men, we don't get the same benefits from testosterone because we're not activating our brain to make it. And that's where gonadorelin is a great peptide for that. We got him on epitalin, reset the pineal gland so he can sleep better at night. BPC 157, if you want to be cool in the peptide world, just say I'm on BPC 157. Of course I'm on it. Great angiogenic peptide, MOTC NAD. Once again, NAD is like the fuel for the mitochondria, and MOTC is a good peptide to help with better endurance, better muscle contraction, and it's one of the best genes expressed in longevity. So the other thing we had him on was methylene blue. And mostly because I wanted him to get nervous, because I said if your urine turns green or like a bluish color, you need to go right to the hospital. And if any of you have taken methylene blue, that's what we want. But I'm joking. It was not like that. So here's, we did some treatments on his knees. We did treatments on his brain, which we'll talk about. And then he said within 6 months, he lost 32 pounds. He can golf, hike, walk. He remembers the dimensions of the building that he architected. So I think the moral of the story is, and for his brain, by the way, with the brain, we did a treatment with intranasal stem cells. So I was the first patient outside of a clinical trial to do this. And it solved my ADHD in like 11 hours. I can't remember who I was talking to about this yesterday, but, oh, there you are. Yeah, so we're going to do that to you too, buddy. But the phenomenal thing about that is if you can get the right treatments at the right time, you can make massive differences in your life. So really appreciate you guys. I think your health is the most valuable thing that you've got as an entrepreneur, and you're going to need it for the long run. So get your blood work done. We've got, we gifted that to you guys, so take advantage, and I've got a great team who can help you interpret it.